trauma, I realized, this idea of healing the fragmented selves goes back many, many years when a student of mine asked me, what is healing? And I thought, that is a very good question. It's not reliving all the terrible memories. It's not using EMDR to process them. Certainly, people get a lot of benefit out of, especially methods like EMDR, sensory motor psychotherapy, somatic experiencing, IFS. But do they feel healed? And I realized that healing is the moment that we accept ourselves lovingly and unconditionally. We forgive ourselves what we believe was our fault, and we go forward with a sense of compassion, with a real relation, a real attachment to those young parts of us that survived. So how do we end up alienated from ourselves, alienated from our parts? Because trauma is so overwhelming that, especially as children, we need distance. And we're able to achieve that because we have the mental ability of dissociation. Dissociation allows us to observe the abuse, the horror, the humiliation, as if we were watching a movie. The child who's watching may be horrified by what she sees, but she's observing that other child actually enduring it. Now, what we're left with then is the child watcher who says, that's not me. And the bad child, the child who endured the abuse because somehow she deserved it. It was her fault. And that's a survival response, because the child watcher, the good child, quote unquote, feels a sense of okayness, right? It's okay. I'm okay. It didn't happen to me. And very conveniently, this alienation from self allows us to disown the trauma. Very convenient. It turns out that there's a lot that needs to be disowned in an abusive, neglectful family. If children can disown the needs that won't be met or the needs that will be humiliated, if they disown the feelings that will be punished, adaptation is easier. It creates just a little more safety, but there's a price to be paid because it becomes a habit. It becomes what we know. Vulnerable feelings, needs, that child who was abused continue to feel not me, not anything to do with me. And that's why you hear clients minimizing, because that's the observer child who says, oh, it wasn't so bad. And that self-alienation also allows children to remain attached to abusive parents, which is necessary for survival, for physical survival. Right, even homeless children need an adult. Now, you can recognize the signs that your client is split in this way by looking for these manifestations. If your client hates themselves, if they're constantly judging themselves, if their self-esteem is in the toilet. And there's no ability to take in or believe anything positive about themselves. If they're terminally ambivalent, which is my term for clients who are stuck, they can't make decisions, they can't commit, they can't even to something as simple as, I'm going to get a new job, I'm going to take a college class. Self-sabotage, in my mind, is a sign of terminal ambivalence. If your client is numb, disconnected from emotion, or the opposite, overwhelmed and with no ability to take a step back from emotion, no ability to soothe or comfort themselves, those are all signs of self-alienation. Eating disorders, addictions, self-harm, all the different kinds of self-destructive behavior, including suicidality. Clients who have very paradoxical, contradictory behavior, perhaps very paranoid or about certain things, and absolutely unaware, no fear about more dangerous things. If your client has a dissociative disorder or is diagnosed borderline, ding, 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 those are signs of self-alienation. And if your client has chronic treatment-resistant depression or treatment-resistant anxiety, those are also other signs. Now, I look at this list and I think, these are our clients. This is what they present us with. Not every single one of these, but certainly some number of them. So, so if we go by this list, this is very, very common, this type of internal splitting. How do we do that? How does the brain pull off self-alienation? Well, the brain is very conveniently already fragmented. We call it the brain, but in fact, the brain consists of structures, lots of structures, bigger and smaller, with specific functions that communicate via neural networks. And the two most obvious structures in the brain are the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. So it's almost like the brain was designed to be able to fragment or compartmentalize whenever we need that. In fact, we're born right brain dominant. So we, little babies, bless their hearts, have half a brain working for them, which is fine. That's all they need, because the right brain is the survival brain. It has no verbal language. But it's a very, very, very good reader of body language and facial expression, which is what young children need to sense when their parents are dangerous. The right brain is emotional. It's intuitive. It's, of course, creative. And it senses things. It cannot evaluate danger because, again, it doesn't have the capacity of thought or emotion, but it senses danger. The left brain is really rare, sort of hardly making an appearance in the first year of life. And then it has a little growth spurt as babies learn language. And if you've been around children, you know this language growth is very, 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 very slow. So as children get more verbal, I'm thinking of my grandchild who's 3.5 going on 4. She's verbal, but it's a limited verbal, right? She doesn't speak in paragraphs. She speaks in sentences and phrases. She can plan in the sense that if she's experienced something, she can plan for it. If her mother reminds her, hey, it's almost Easter, it's almost your birthday. But she doesn't at 4 have the reasoning, planning, and organizing ability that the left brain develops as we get into the later latency age years and then into the teenage years. The left brain has the ability to store information, to retrieve it and use it, to anticipate the future, and very importantly, learn from experience. It can evaluate danger. It has no ability to sense danger. It has little ability to sense emotion. But it's the only part of the brain that can talk about the emotions. So we need a third structure called the corpus callosum that corresponds to this chasm between the two sides, called the corpus callosum. And the job of the corpus callosum is to communicate back and forth. We have an emotion, it's communicated to the left brain puts it into words, the right brain communicates it back to the right brain. The right brain can notice, oh, that feels right, or that doesn't. We don't have to understand words to feel, are these the right words? The problem is the corpus callosum is very slow growing, and it doesn't mature until we are over 12. So in childhood, a fragmented brain is normal, right? The right and left brains by the age of 6 or 7, both brains are working, but they're not coordinating.